Hey, everybody, this is Chris
and Cathy
from PetAbility Podcast. We wanted to take a minute to thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate every listener and are grateful for this platform.
Please help us share our vision by subscribing to PetAbility Podcast through your favorite streaming app. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at PetAbility Podcast and share our content on social media.
You can also support the show by making a donation. Simply go to our website at petabilitypodcast.buzzsprout.com and click on the heart symbol at the top of the page. Thanks for listening.
We hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to PetAbility. I'm your host, Cathy Simons.
And I'm your host, Chris Cranston. Our podcast provides interviews and information to help your pets live their best lives. Hello, Cathy. How are you this afternoon?
Hello, Chris. I'm doing pretty good. I'm freezing, though. I'll tell you what. It was like 70 yesterday. It was like
20.
It's like 20 degrees out here.
Yeah.
You know?
Plus wind chill.
Oh, yeah, it's not good for me. Oh, there goes my dog. He's not happy about it either.
He's not happy with the weather either. He's like, I second that.
This weather is not pug friendly. This weather is not pug friendly. He's pretty upset about that. So.
Especially a fit pug like Mac, because he doesn't have that extra layer of body fat.
I know.
That some dogs do.
He's really in shape for a pug. I mean, he's pretty buff. But anyway. He doesn't like to get wet or cold, and so today's not his day. But
yeah.
But anyway, I'm so glad that we're talking this day, because we've had this conversation for quite some time about talking about this topic that we're going to discuss today, about whether we should to raise our dog bulls or not to raise our dog bulls.
Exactly. To raise or not to raise the bulls?
That is the question.
That is the question of the day. And I'd actually suggested this topic to you because it's something that I talk to every single client about. It's kind of like traction for me. And the importance of traction. I think that it's a simple lifestyle question, that one can ponder in their situation and really help their pets going forward.
I have to tell you, I'm not as good about the bull raising as you are when we're assessing the dog in their home. But after doing a lot of research on it, I have to add this to my evaluation, right? And there was so much to learn. I know what elevated bulls are too. I know what elevated bulls are, exactly what it sounds like, but there are lots of questions that go with elevated bulls. What's the right size? How high do we elevate the dogs? Is every dog a candidate for having their bulls raised? So there's lots of things to delve into as far as to raise or not to raise,
Yeah. So what did your research reveal? Well, first, let me ask you, what is your conclusion? Because I know when I brought it up, you said, I'm going to have to research this a little bit. And obviously you have. So in general, do you think it's a valid thing to recommend?
Okay. So let me tell you what I did first before I started reading. Okay. The first thing I did was I got a bowl, right, of cereal. Reese's Puffs, because it actually mimics a little bit more of the kibble, the consistency and the shape of kibble. It's also delicious with the chocolate and the peanut butter. And I put it on.
Is that really cereal, or is it just breakfast candy?
It's so delicious. It's so delicious. But anyway, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to, do my best to mimic what the experience would be for a dog. And I thought that was, probably the closest in shape and so forth. So I put it on the floor and I got down on all fours and I tried to eat out of the bowl while I'm on all fours, while the bowl's on the floor. So the bowl's on the floor and I have to bring my neck down, to get my head into the bowl. I also had to move my arms. I had to get my arms flexed to get my neck down that far, right? I also had to spread them just a little bit.
I wish people not only could see you doing this, but could see my facial expression now.
Okay, yeah.
Because this is classic. I love it. Okay, go on. Do tell.
I wanted to know what the experience was, right? So now, I've got my neck bent down into the bowl. I had to flex my arms. I had to abduct my shoulders a bit. And while I'm on my knees, I had to kind of roll up on my knees a little bit to get forward, right? So I was like, this is not, I mean, of course, I don't eat that way normally, folks, just for clarification.
Really?
But, it's not, I don't. But yeah, it was awkward to me, certainly, as a human, to be in this position, but it was also a bit uncomfortable, right? It's a bit uncomfortable. And then I raised the bowl, I took the bowl and I put it on a chair. So the chair was about if I'm on all fours, the chair is probably at my shoulder, right? It was so much more comfortable for me. It's so much easier to get access to the food. It also was a little bit less messy because I couldn't pick up all the pieces when I was on the floor. But I felt it when it was a more comfortable position for me. My back was in alignment, right? It was in its proper position. I didn't have to bend my legs or my neck, and I didn't have to make a whole lot of body accommodations. Does that make sense? I had to make a lot of accommodations to be able to eat from the bowl. So my feeling was overall, I felt that I was more comfortable in the scenario where I had the bowls raised. So I think that there's validity to it, right? I think that there's something to consider about it. And I guess a couple of things I did, I also looked up any studies about, whether there was any risk factors for elevation of bowls, right? So are there any factors that could potentially be a con in this situation rather than a pro? I found one article in the Journal of American Veterinary Medical Association where they did a study, a little over 1,600 animals, 1,637 dogs. Right?
Wow, that's a big study.
And, yeah, it's a big study. And all these dogs were over the age of 6 months old, and they were large breed dogs. So the group included Akitas, Bloodhounds, Great Danes, Collies, Irish Setters, Wolfhounds, some Newfoundlands, Rottweilers, a St. Bernard, a Standard Poodle, and some Weimaraners. So they took a group of large breed dogs and they fed them with the raised bowls. And so, overall, the conclusion of that was that the incidence of what they're considering about these hot dogs, being high risk is it a potential factor in bloat, or what the name is actually gastric dilatation volvulus, but most people probably know it as bloat, right? And that's when the stomach fills up with air and air gets trapped and whatever's in the stomach gets trapped. And that stomach actually starts to flip and twist on itself. And that's a very bad, very dangerous.
Right. It can be life-threatening emergency, right?
And what they found is that it was a factor in these dogs. Now, you have to take into consideration that there were other things, that these dogs are large breed dogs. You have to take into consideration that there might have been a history in the family of, in their line of bloat. But overall, they felt that there was a little bit of a risk factor with raised bowls when you're feeding these giant breed dogs. Now, there was no study on small breed dogs, and I think that everything I found on small to medium-sized dogs suggests that, yes, you should elevate your dog's bowls. But with our large breed dogs, I think we need to be careful. I think we need to talk that over with our veterinarian about whether we should or should not raise our bowls when we're looking at large or giant breed dogs.
So let me ask you this. I guess I have a lot of questions. So I had heard that too. And I've been recommending the raised bowls for all sizes of dogs, big, small, giant, tiny, for decades now. And what I had heard is that we already know that large breed, giant breed dogs that are deep chested, so a lot of the breeds you mentioned, but in particular, I think of like Great Danes and Dobermans and things like that, are already predisposed to bloat based on their anatomy. So how did this study, determine that it was actually the elevated bowls versus just the conformation and build of the breed itself?
Well, I think that they considered those factors as well. I think that they were like, let me see if I can read the cumulative incidence of GDV during the study was 6% for large breed and giant breed dogs. Factors significantly associated with increased risk of GDV were increasing age, having a first-degree relative with a history of GDV, faster eating styles, so dogs that eat quickly, and having raised or elevated bowls. So approximately 20 and 52% of cases of GDV among the large and giant breed dogs, respectively, were attributed to having, a raised bowl. And also keep in mind that this study was it's only one I could find, and it was done 20 years ago. And I think the other thing that needs to be said about GDV is we still don't know a lot about it. We still don't know very much about it.
Right.
So I think that you have to take it into consideration with all these other factors as well. So, dogs eating fast, and is there a history, and should we or should we not raise those bowls?
Interesting. I'm glad you mentioned it was 20 years ago because, again, I've been doing this almost 20 years, and that's what I had heard initially as well. This is a healthy debate, Cathy.
I know.
that raised bowls causes bloat. And so I, was really paying attention, and I think it was based on that study. Again, sounds like a great study, large number. A lot of times in veterinary studies, you don't get a huge sample size. But I thought that since then, the raised bowl had been dispelled as not a factor, that it's more of a myth. I'm glad you mentioned about the eating faster, because that's what I had heard is if it's more comfortable for a pet to eat, and they love their food, we all know those crazy dogs that, like they live to eat, not eat to live.
Me too. Me too.
Yes. And so, now it's like right there. It's right there at their mouth. And they're like, oh my God, this is good. And they just like inhale their food. Yeah. And so if it's easier for them to eat faster because it's elevated and more comfortable, then that could, kind of perpetuate
that's the factor.
That myth. Yeah, exactly. That's the factor, the eating fast. So I kind of come to the conclusion, and, in my study, my N of 1, Chris Cranston, that, the bloat is a factor based on conformation and how fast they eat, and then exercising immediately after they eat.
Which we don't want to ever do.
No, we don't want to ever do, because that causes that stomach to twist upon itself even more so. And we know that in general, smaller breed dogs do not have the incidence of bloat. It's much, much rarer. Yeah. So I don't even know when I started recommending the raised bowls, but it's been a long time. That's how long. I can't even remember. But, as a physical therapist, I was just thinking about the biomechanics, and, to your point in your experiment, yes, we're bipedal creatures. And so, typically we're not as comfortable on our hands and knees and all fours. But, I was watching my dogs, other dogs eat and drink, and also thinking about the problems and injuries for which I was treating these pets. And we've mentioned in other shows that oftentimes, we're treating for cruciate injuries, post-surgical, knee stabilization surgeries, that sort of thing, hip dysplasia, a lot of rear end issues. And I'm watching them lean forward, and these dogs aren't increasing their strength and muscle mass, maybe to the degree that I would like in that leg and those hindquarters in general. And so I'm like, what is an everyday thing that an owner can do that's fairly simple that would lift the head? So that's ultimately what I want to do, right? Yeah, so the head with its brain is fairly weighty. And so whenever, and we've talked about this in other shows with talking about exercise and such, whenever we bring the head up, weight is shifted to the rear. So why not do that while they're eating, keep their top line more level, bring that head up, get more weight on their hind feet. And also, if they do have a front end injury, oftentimes we're trying to spare that from overwork, because a normal dog without any injury that's perfectly healthy has 60% of their weight on their front limbs and 40% on the back. So they're already getting relatively more use. And as dogs age, or certainly if they have a rear end injury, then that ratio becomes skewed even more, 70-30, 80-20. Yeah. So I want to do everything that I can in general. Most of the time, I say 8 times out of 10, I'm treating a rear leg injury, lower back injury, something like that. And I want to do everything I can to strengthen the hind legs and relieve stress, pressure strain from the front limbs and the neck.
Yep. Yeah. And I think also, I mean, would you agree that if you have the bowl elevated like that too, you're not only that, but you're also, I mean, you have to stabilize yourself, right? And so you're doing a little bit of, sometimes I have animals just as part of their exercise, depending on what's wrong with them, stand for 10 seconds without weight shifting, because I feel like they're getting, they're exercising some of their core muscles and muscles around the spinal cord too, just to stabilize themselves.
Well, I do think that especially if they aren't engaging their trunk very well, more caudally back toward the tail, or using those hind legs. So again, if we can get that balance, amongst the forelimbs and throughout the entire spine and trunk, then I think that, yes, definitely stabilization. And to your point, Cathy, sometimes what I start with a very differently abled dog that's quite weak or deconditioned, maybe very geriatric or has some profound disease process or illness, is simply the goal is have them stand to eat.
Yes.
And
agree.
And so, that's what they would normally do, versus lying down to eat or sitting to eat. I mean, there are those outliers, but that are just lazy dogs.
I agree. And I will often do that, especially with maybe some of these neuro patients and stuff as well, and get them to stand where they're eating. And sometimes I just prescribe standing, and I could just see the look on the owner's face, like, I just paid for that. Like, that's your advice. Stand. But it's good advice. It's good advice for a lot of these dogs to stand to eat or to stand in general without weight shifting, right? So it is an exercise. I didn't just make it up. It really is. But I think it's good. Yeah. And even for some of my patients who have, like, I think about, I have a patient with a forelimb amputation, and I have her raise her bulls as well, because she has to kind of, that position that she has to get into. So some of these dogs, you're right, that are differently abled, geriatric, maybe tripod, certainly those elevated bulls are going to make things easier for them as far as their body, mechanics, right? So here's my question, though. How do we know how high to raise these bulls? Now, for me, now I know if I'm going to eat on all fours, my comfortable level is at the shoulder, where when I'm eating out of a bowl, of course. But how do I know? How do I know what's the right size for my dog, right? How do I know if my bowl should be raised 2 inches from the ground or should be raised 6 inches from the ground?
Right. And I think early on, that's what many people would ask me in terms of, height, how many inches? And I would always say at least to the elbow, but no higher than the shoulder. But sometimes it's hard based on the breed of the dog and the conformation to know, exactly where those landmarks are. And I think that the higher you can get it up to the shoulder, the better in terms of shifting that weight. But if you get it too high, the dog can't get its muzzle down in the bowl. And I had a client, I felt so badly. This was early on, and, I'd given them some instructions like that. And, they were well-to-do and they had a staff, and she instructed the gentleman to make elevated bowls for their dog. And they were beautiful. And I'm sure it took him many hours. He presents the bowl set and they were too high. The dog could not get.
Oh, that's a bummer.
But I said, great job. This is, awesome. Just cut it down at the bottom, just take a couple inches off. But now I've actually, because it is such a question for people, I will measure and I will give them, and usually it's not an exact range because, if I should say it is a range, not an exact number, because, fortunately, there are many types of elevated bowls out there now. When you and I started doing this, Cathy, they were unheard of. People were just putting them up on a box or, a crate or something like that. But an elevated bowl, even if our audience is thinking, I'm going to order this large one because I have a golden retriever online, and the large is 10 inches off the ground, and the small is 6 inches off the ground. That's not enough. So oftentimes like a golden retriever will be like 16, 17 inches. But, I'll say, I'll show them on their dog anywhere from here to here. And usually I give them about a 2-inch range from the tip of the shoulder in the front. Usually you can feel a bone sticking out. That's the maximum height. And then I'll go, an inch or two down from there. So if that measures at, 15, I'll say 13 to 15 inches.
So almost, potentially what we would like to see is maybe it be square with their chest, if possible. So they're not lifting their head up or down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they have to be able to tip their nose down into it.
Right.
But they're not straining their head and neck down to the ground nor lifting it up. And their top line, their spine should stay level. Once they put their muzzle in the bowl, it shouldn't, raise up or go down, in the front. It should be nice and whatever the starting position was, I think is a good way to look at it. And this would be true for any dog, right? So it's a relative thing. So sometimes I have this question on my evaluation form, are your pet's bowls elevated? And people write in, no, she's a small dog. But I think, it's relative to the size that they are. If they're only a few inches off the ground, they still have to, get their head down. But obviously it would be much farther for a wolfhound, to your point, be feet, not inches, to get down to the ground. But I think any size dog could potentially benefit from an elevated bowl. And one of the things that was really, I remember this just hit home because I've been recommending them for a while, but it was an owner that said to me, I just met them. We were talking, discussing their pet. And she said, I thought my dog was sick because he wouldn't eat. He stopped eating. And so, I kept trying. I'm putting different food in the bowl, and do I need to take him to the vet? What's going on? And she happened to lift the bowl and he devoured it. And it turned out when she got the pet to the vet, he had a cervical disc. So,
and he couldn't get his head
bulging,
down.
Yes, a bulging disc in his neck, and it hurt. He was hungry, but he couldn't get his head down comfortably.
Oh, poor man.
Exactly. So I think, and that's an example I'll use with everybody. I'm like, imagine, if your neck hurt, the first thing we do is bring the bowl up so that the dog's neck is not strained anymore. Well, why wouldn't we do that for every dog just to prevent that strain? It's kind of like ergonomics for your pet, right? They're not sitting at a desk chair and using the computer in terms of ergonomics. Their work in life is eating their food.
My dog has an he likes, he has a special chair for his bed. But what it makes me think of, like, if I think about, what would be the closest thing to in the wild, maybe wild dogs or wolves or coyotes. I don't know that I think once they've made their kill, if I'm not mistaken, I have to look this up. I think they get down in a sphinx position to eat. I don't know that they lower their head. I'm gonna have to look that up and see what wild dogs do.
You raise a good point, because as I'm thinking about it, same. I think a lot of times they're kind of lying at the carcass, or they'll take
sternal.
They'll take a piece of meat off and kind of covet it, if you will, and eat their portion. But maybe that's why, they just have the sense to, kind of keep everything in a good position.
When I put my head down, I'm more comfortable in this position. Exactly.
But when they are standing and in the proper position, I do think that any dogs with digestive issues, kind of like slow motility. My Baxter has a problem with that, with gastric reflux and so forth. And so anything that we can do to aid the food going from his mouth down to his stomach and being digested is a good thing, versus getting caught in his esophagus between his mouth and tummy. So when you think about it, if the head's down at the ground, it's kind of got to go north against gravity and kind of do a U-turn and then go down into the stomach.
And then go down.
Yeah.
And get pushed down.
If he's starting higher, then it's just kind of a slide right on down from the north to south. So,
And there are so many really nice elevated bowls on the market. Like, I looked them up to see what was out there, and they're just, oh my gosh, they have some that are so fancy and so nice to go with your home decor, blended with your and I also found one that was adjustable. So it came on like a stand, and the bowls had you could actually raise or lower them. So if you if you find that it's too low, you could just loosen it and move the bowls up. So I thought that was pretty neat too. So you have a wide range there. Or if you have multiple dogs, you feed one and then you lower it for another, or you make it higher for the other dog. I don't know, but it was a lot of really good stuff out there.
Yes.
So do your homework on it.
Absolutely.
I like a dog bowl that doesn't like scoot across the floor. I like to have one that doesn't, and a lot of these are pretty good about not being able to push them over or knock them down. Especially the one with the stand. It's pretty good too.
Right. Yeah. They'll oftentimes have a big, like wooden base, a metal base, a plastic. And, it's kind of, if not square, rectangular, almost pyramidal. Is that how you say it? In shape. So like the bottom is wider than the top. So it is very stable. And then having, rubber footings or what have you, so they don't slide around. I do want to go back to the adjustable. I actually sold those, in my business because I feel so strongly about the raised bowls, and the population that I was treating, because I couldn't carry everything that's out there and have the right size for every dog, like we were just discussing. Right. So the adjustable stand, fantastic. There's two issues with it that I want people to consider.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. One, it is on a metal stand and it has this, you unscrew it and the bowls slide up and down on this column. Mm-hmm. And then you cinch it in. The bowls are inside a ring, like a metal wire ring, and the metal bowls sit down inside. That's the kind I had. Well, it rattles. It's not the most stable in terms of, just as they're eating and licking and, that's nudging the bowl, it's going tick, 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 and because it's metal on metal. Not that couldn't be, you could do something to address it, but it is kind of annoying, especially if you have dogs that are very sound sensitive, and may not, want to experience that, while they're eating. It could really throw them off if they've never heard anything like that before.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And also if your dog is a little bit, I always tell people that if there's a way that you can transition it slowly, which that would allow you to do, right? If it's adjustable, you can start low and then gradually bring it up and find that perfect, comfortable height. But I'll say just experiment by putting it up on something, the normal bowl. Don't change the bowl. Put your normal bowl up on something a few inches high to start, and then maybe a little bit higher. And if you're having success, then make that investment, make that purchase, because now you know that they don't have any problem with it. I have had people buy something that, again, was really expensive because it matches their decor, as you mentioned, and the dog won't eat out of it. So just like the most expensive dog bed, right? We've talked about that on our bed show. It doesn't mean that it's the best for your dog. It's just expensive.
Yes, so, exactly. And the most expensive isn't always what's going to work for your dog.
Yeah, they have their own preferences. And even considering things like, metal, stainless steel, I should say, versus ceramic versus plastic. We all know that plastic actually harbors some bacteria, so that's not ideal. But, if you change, you're thinking, I'm going to get this wonderful stand. If it's a different type of bowl that goes in there, that could be the factor, not just the fact that it's elevated. Maybe your dog's always eaten out of a ceramic bowl, and now this has a metal bowl, and they don't like that.
And they don't like it. Yeah. Especially if their tag hits. If you have a dog with a tag and it's all.
Yes.
So, wow.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that was a heated debate there, Chris. I got really heated there.
There's one other thing I want to say too.
Yeah.
I've had people say that their dog is using the elevator bowl, but true to form, they'll pick up their food and then put it on the floor. Yep. And they're like, I spent $60 on this stand and they're still eating off the floor. And I'm like, well, what can you do?
You did the best you could. Yes, that is perfect to end with because, yes, I've seen that happen as well. And no matter what you do, no matter what you put it in, they're going to pick up a few kibble and then put it on the floor and then eat it off the floor. But it just speaks to your dog's eating style. We do the best that we can to make them comfortable in their body mechanics. And if your dog is going to pick it up and put it on the floor, I don't know what else to tell you about that.
Before we close the show, Cathy, what do you think about cats and elevating bowls for cats?
I hadn't really thought about it, actually. That's a really good question. When I think about cats and how they eat, again, I think I see most of the cats that I've seen eat, almost get again into a little bit of that Sphinx position. Now, they're not quite all the way down because they've got to be prepared to, spring away in case, danger comes, but they're down a little bit more level. I don't know that I rarely see a cat stand completely to eat, but it does happen. Sure. I've seen it. Yeah. But again, I think it can't hurt. Cats get back pain too. Cats get neck pain too. Cats get soft tissue injuries. I not only would I consider maybe elevating the bowl, but putting the elevated bowl even on top of something so the cat gets to eat up high on their shelf with their maybe with their elevated bowl.
Yes.
But we shouldn't be dismissive of cats and their pain or their body mechanics either. Right. And so, I think that you could potentially, elevate them a bit and give them a better body mechanics when they're eating.
Yeah. I think to your point, it's a bit. That question had been raised to me, with my cat owner clients and same. I'm like, they eat kind of in that crouched position, low to the floor, but maybe you could just put it up on a book or something like that, just a little bit higher. If, you thought there was an issue, but in terms of kind of sparing the front limbs or, getting more weight on the back end, I don't think that necessarily is equivalent between the dog and the cat and how they eat, their styles. But if your cat had some neck or back pain, I think potentially it could help by bringing it up a little bit. But again, you don't want it to raise their head into what we call extension and being uncomfortable. You're just trying to almost like slide that bowl in, whether it's the dog or the cat, to where it would naturally seem like it should be. I know that's kind of vague, but I think if our audience starts watching, they'll be able to figure that out. And then if it's wrong, see what's unnatural. I just want to put a plug in here for traction too. This is one of the key places that I make sure that a dog has a non-skid rug, a rubber flooring, a mat, whatever. We often put the mat under the bowls because we are worried about it slopping onto the floor, but we need a mat or rug under the dog or animal for traction so that they engage their muscles, because it's weight bearing that really is effective. We want them to engage their muscles during their eating time, and it becomes a benign passive exercise, if you will.
Right. And that's a really great point, Chris, that this in particular is the place that you're going to want to have good traction. I don't want my dogs splaying, or I don't want patients splaying, slipping, sliding. I don't want them to have to fight to keep their balance, necessarily about falling while they're eating. I do want them to keep their balance because that's part of the exercise, but I want them to fall. Also, if you're not confident about standing there and eating, the whole time because you think you might fall, that's a big issue as well. We've had many a discussion with our friend, Dr. Julie Busby, about traction. And my husband always goes, oh my gosh, every episode we're talking about traction, but it's, every episode, it's so vital. It's so, so important. To have in specific areas of the home, particularly at the food bowl, at the water bowl. I don't want to go to a restaurant and have to worry about slipping and falling while I'm eating the cheeseburger. I want to have the confidence I'm not going to be able, they're not going to fall. Or be frightened also, of falling.
Yeah, it'd be like us trying to like you said, navigate on like a greasy floor or something like that.
Whoa, and trying to eat
while we're eating and drinking. Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned the word splaying too, because if anybody's had that dog that is weak in the hind end and you're watching them, eat their dinner on like a hardwood floor, something that's slippery, over time, as they're standing there, those legs will just start to slide out.
Right.
So they're working really, really hard to keep them under them. And I don't want them, quote, because then our owners may say, well, you just said that it can be an exercise. Isn't that a good exercise? But that's not a functional exercise.
It's falling.
I don't want them wasting, quote, wasting energy just trying to keep their legs in while they're eating.
Yeah.
I want them to have that energy for more appropriate activities.
Perfect.
And if their legs are under them and they're just engaging them in a weight-bearing position, then that is appropriate, right? You're strengthening in that proper biomechanical position. But if you're constantly fighting to bring those legs in, the adductor muscles, the squeezy muscles on the inside of the thigh are just getting overworked, and then they're too pooped to go out for their walk later, that kind of thing. So,
So I'm going to say yay or nay on the raised bowls. For me, I'm going to say, yeah, I think that it's a good idea. I think that when it comes to our giant breed dogs, though, and our large breed dogs, caution, and maybe have that discussion with your veterinarian about, is there a history of GDV in your dog's line? Does your dog eat fast? What is their eating style? So I think that with the large and the giant breed dogs, we should proceed with caution. But for our small and medium dogs and our cats, I'm on board. Good.
I've been on board for a long time, so I'm definitely a yay. I'm definitely a yay. I feel like I won you over, Cathy.
You did. And I'm glad we had this show because I want to add this into my evaluation process, because when I just was at someone's home over the weekend, and I looked at their flooring, and I looked at their bedding, and I looked at the placement of the bedding, and but the one thing I didn't check was the dog bowls. Mm-hmm. Are they elevated? Where are they in the house? Are they elevated? And is there good traction? So I'm putting it on my list.
Put it on your list.
All for the better care of your animals. Exactly. All for the better care. That's right.
Well, fantastic debate, Cathy. Thanks for engaging. And I hope that this gives our listeners pause and that they will think about it for their own situations.
I think that they will consider it as well. So thanks, Chris. Thanks for bringing up this topic. I had a great time talking about it today.
Toodaloo.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our show. Follow us on Facebook or on Instagram at PetAbility Podcast.
For more information about Cathy's books and living with blind dogs, please go to enableyourpet.com. Thank you, and please tune in next time.